Security Information Event Management Platforms, or SIEMs, or SIMs. You can pronounce it however you want, but it's that centralized location where all of your security information and events get poured into so you can manage them. And endpoint detection and response, or an EDR. Maybe you can even up the ante if that takes in some network telemetry. You can call that an extended detection and response platform, or XDR. That's the security tool that detects and responds to incidents or malicious activity, hackers in the network. Now, those tools and all the others for modern day cybersecurity defense can get pretty expensive, but I want to tell you about one awesome utility that combines that SIEM and XDR solution, and it's totally free and open source and awesome all around. I want to tell you about Wazuh. Wazuh is exactly that. It is the open source security platform, and it is super duper easy to kick the tires and get it running. We're gonna set it up in like less than 5 minutes. But look at all the cool things you can do with it. It is endpoint security after all. It's running on your computer, on your devices, but you can do some threat hunting, like look for hackers, try to find malware, dig into logs, different vulnerabilities, and do some incident response if something goes wrong. Or track a whole lot of those regulations like GDPR, PCI, HIPAA, all those, and even cloud security with Office 365 or AWS integrations. I could keep singing the praises of Wazuh. It is super duper cool, but you know what? Let's just dive in. Let's set it up in an on-premise environment so that we can play with it. It is open source after all, and we can roll with it completely free. All we have to do is click that big install Wazuh button. Now here's the gist. Wazuh started as a fork of the OSSec project way back in I think 2015, like 8 years ago, and it worked a lot with Elasticsearch. So there are different components that make up the sort of server and agent architecture. You have a Wazuh indexer, you have the Wazuh server itself, and then the dashboard for you to be able to look into things and explore. That makes up the server component, but the agents, the actual computers that are under management with Wazuh, that's all worked by the agents. And the agents can run on like anything. There's support for Linux, there's support for Windows, Mac OS, even Solaris. I got like HPUX in here. It's super cool. Let's try it out. We can go ahead and click the quick start button, and then we get dropped into the documentation. Now I know not everyone likes to read, but I am a huge proponent of showing you the documentation and getting it in front of you because that is literally the guidebook that has all the answers. Just a matter of taking a look. So I will be showcasing a lot of the documentation, but I think that is super important if you want to play with this. So here is the quick start guide on spinning up Wazuh. Completely free, open source. You can take a look at the licenses, but here the hardware requirements are pretty easy. Not gonna lie, we can just spin this up in our own virtual machine. It takes whatever operating system here, but the back-end sort of central components, the server side, should be on 64-bit Linux. We can just get this cruising on a modern Ubuntu 22.4. And I gotta be honest, this is just copy-paste. You can download and install the Wazuh installation assistant with just a simple curl, and then, hey, okay, run it with sudo bash. I know some folks might get a little bit squeamish on, oh, pipe curl to bash, but look, we can dig into the source code, we can examine that script if we really wanted to, and I think we can trust it and run it. Now, if you don't already have an Ubuntu Linux machine kind of set up for yourself, maybe just something that you could kick the tires with and run with, we can go ahead and download the Ubuntu desktop or Ubuntu server versions from their website, but I do happen to have just maybe a simple little test bed that we could play with, an Ubuntu 22.04 virtual machine that I will go ahead and clone, and we'll just call this, yeah, based off of a recent fresh install, a linked clone for our Wazuh YouTube dashboard. That is spun up. I'm going to go ahead and create a snapshot for just a simple fresh clone, and let's turn this sucker on. All right, so we are in our Ubuntu box. Let's go ahead and open up the terminal here. I'll go ahead and full screen this, amp up the text size a little bit. Now let's get back to the Wazuh documentation and just sort of copy and paste this curl command to go ahead, download and install Wazuh. Before I do that, I know I'm going to be hopping in and out of a lot of different computers for this demo, so I am going to go ahead and change the background on this terminal to just something that we are able to recognize, maybe just white text on a black background. And that way we'll know that that is our server. Now we'll go ahead and paste this all in, and let's fire it up. Need to enter our password with sudo. Starting the Wazuh installation assistant. This is the modern version. Current release, I think, is 4.5.4, and then it'll just start cruising. Not too much to this. You really just kind of let it do its thing. Hey, it'll add the repository, it'll set up the indexer, and soon enough, it'll be done. It'll just spit out, hey, our username and password to be able to log in to the web interface of the Wazuh dashboard. And well, let's go ahead and store this password just somewhere safe so we'll be able to remember it and use it here. And with that, we can go ahead and access our dashboard. We'll need to know our dashboard IP address, which is just localhost for the sake of, hey, perspective of the server. But if we actually took a look at our current IP address, we are 192.168.111.161. So we'll keep that in mind when we start to install our agents. But first things first, let's just go take a look. I'll open up my web browser Firefox, and easy peasy, let's just go to 192.168.111.161. I'll hit enter here, and this is a self-signed certificate, but that is a-okay. We know we just installed this thing. So let me go ahead and hit advanced and just accept the risk continue. Oh, here we are, the Wazuh open source security platform. All right, the username was admin, and the password we can go ahead and paste in. Let's log in. Sweet, firing on all cylinders, making sure everything is good to go, and here we are. So this is the Wazuh dashboard. There's not a whole lot to it right now because we need to go ahead and add agents to the manager, to this server instance. But take a look at all the different things that we could dig into once we get started. You know what? Hey, let's just keep cruising. Let me go ahead and add an agent here. Brings up this deploy a new agent little wizard, and look at all the different things it supports. Check it out. If you show more, you can see all the different operating systems that you might be able to just fire up in here. OpenSUSE, Alpine. We're keeping it easy. Let's just use another Ubuntu instance, and we'll use Ubuntu 15 and up, right? We're just using 22.4. Architecture is x86. That's fine. Our server address needs to be the IP address of our server, which we know is .161 here. It's optional, but we could set up an agent name, sort of like a, hey, an identifier for that specific endpoint. I want to be able to add a Windows host later, so I'm just going to call this one Linux. Now, if we scroll down, hey, here is the command. Here's everything that we need to just get this thing hooked up to Wazuh. But of course, we need a computer. We need another box to be able to put this agent on. I'm going to keep it easy. Let me just go ahead and clone another Ubuntu instance. Here we go. Let's go ahead and cook up that box. And okay, here we are in that new Ubuntu instance. That will be our agents, or sort of our client here. And we can go ahead and just copy and paste that curl command. Here, let's click to copy that from the Wazuh dashboard setup here. Right click and paste and hit enter. Enter that password for sudo, and that's it. It's done. Wazuh is installed and ready on this sort of client agent box. But we can't forget, we should get this thing started. We need to have it run as a service, and they'll be using systemctl to go ahead and reload that daemon and get it cruising. This is actually worth noting here because I'll go ahead and paste these commands in, but keep in mind, we'll use this sudo systemctl start or restart or status of the Wazuh agent over on our client and our agent boxes, right? Let me do that. Sudo systemctl. Let's do status of our Wazuh agent. And now we can see it is active and running. When we are over on our server side, let me get back to the terminal here. That should be sudo systemctl status of our Wazuh-manager. You can see that if I fill out that password, that is active and running, but it is -manager over on the Linux server side. So let's get back to Firefox, and this has everything done for us. If I go ahead and go home on Wazuh, can I see I have one new total agent? That is awesome. Let's go ahead and click on that, go see our total agents, and there it is. There is our Linux agent. Super cool, super duper easy. Let's add another one because it's so fast and so simple. Let's go ahead and spin one up for our Windows box. We'll go ahead and get a Windows machine booted up for us. Let's go ahead and log in. All right, Windows is ready and ripping here for us, and deployment should be super duper easy again. Fill in that server address. It shouldn't need its own, hey, set agent name, because again, that is optional, and Windows host name will be pretty unique as it is. And this is the command we can simply copy and paste in an administrator PowerShell prompt to get this thing rolling. Let's open up PowerShell. I'll right click and run as administrator. Yes, I'm good to run with it. Let's get full screen with F11 here, and now I am inside Windows PowerShell. And let's go ahead and paste in all that PowerShell to run this. Oh, there it goes. Download it all. And done. Easy peasy. Now we just need the commands to go ahead and start the service, which is pretty simple. It's just Wazuh on Windows. We can use net start to run that, or just start service in PowerShell. Start service Wazuh. Alrighty, looking good on the Windows front. Let's get back to the homepage of Wazuh and look at that. 2 agents. All right. So you can see getting agents hooked into this thing is like crazy easy to do. You can push that out with like group policy or whatever RMM, remote monitoring and management you want. Just fire it out to all the endpoints. And the agents don't do a whole lot. They just like report back all this information. It's meant to be lightweight and keep all the processing on the server components. And the server components, like all the clusters, the indexing, the dashboards, all the brains and the heart of the operation can really be kind of spread out and distributed if you want. We did it super easy with just some on-premise box like a virtual machine, but you could even do it with Docker if you wanted to. Wazuh even supports like multi-tenant options. Now let's go take a look at some of those events, right? Like everything that our SIEM or SIM, Security Information Event Management Platform, is just pulling up here for us. Let's look at those security events for all of our agents and look at this. You can see the breakdown here in these beautiful little graphs and charts. This is gorgeous, by the way. But look, it digs into the MITRE attack framework attacks, different alert levels, or what some of the most talkative and chatty agents are. And ooh, it looks like maybe Linux, our Ubuntu agent, was going through an update. Try to install a whole bunch of different packages, so we have that visibility. And honestly, we can go up to just the event section here, and then we can see in like basically the same sort of Elasticsearch, or it's really OpenSearch now in the back end. But just like we might be familiar with an ELK, you can search through all these different events, dig into and interrogate some of the actual fields and information in there, or we could search for whatever we want. So let's say back on our Linux host, our Ubuntu agent here, right? What if we had some operations? I don't know, we were running the who am I command. Maybe we were firing up different applications. We can open up the calculator, nice and cheesy, or we could start to become the administrator, like sudo bash, to try to see, hey, can we actually make any configuration changes or system administer this machine? Let's get back to the dashboard and let's actually go look at the agents so we could drill down into specifically whatever one we wanted, right? Let's go look at our Linux agent here, our Ubuntu 22.04 LTS box, and look at everything it shows here. We'll dig into the MITRE tactics in just a moment, but I do want to show you like even the compliance portion of this. Like, I know maybe that's not all that sexy and interesting for you, maybe if you're a student, or hey, just kind of wanting to get in the weeds in the operations here. Learning about GDPR and HIPAA and PCI is its own thing. But for companies and organizations that need to obey those specific regulations and standards, this is awesome. You can dig into whatever you really wanted to for either of these compliance standards. NIST is in here. Here's HIPAA, GPG 13. Whenever a rule is fired within Wazuh or any events come through, oftentimes they're actually even tied to those compliance settings. So you could just dig into, I don't know, do we match this specific requirement? I was showing that more drop-down dialog box, and you could get into other policies or system auditing if you wanted to here. And one of my favorites is the security configuration assessment. Because look, if folks are trying to spin up in an organization a hardened system, like a secure network that's boarded up all the doors and windows here, oftentimes you'll go for the CIS benchmarks. If you aren't familiar, the CIS benchmarks, these come from the Center for Information Security. These are a godsend for actually configuring and having like the playbook to structure and set up your environment and harden your systems. And it's really, really cool because Wazuh will just like delta this, like find the benchmark differences that you need to go ahead and configure. And back over here on the dashboard, like, look, we're just trialing this up against the Ubuntu benchmark from the Center for Information Security. And hey, there's a lot of work that we can do from just this flat vanilla install. What if we actually made sure to go through all of these hardening configuration settings? Make sure temp is a separate partition. Make sure that, hey, things can't execute out of the temporary drive. Disable auto mounting of devices. Remove some unneeded tooling so you can limit your attack surface, or you actually configure, hey, some things that make you secure. This is super cool, and I love that Wazuh will just show you that right out of the gate. Okay, now we have Wazuh set up, and we can already see a whole lot of really cool dashboards and some insights and telemetry that are coming from our agents. But let's do some demos. I want to show you some other really cool stuff. And I know here there's a little bit of a delineation on how and where you get security in your environment, right? Your workstations are usually Windows computers that our users use, and our servers are oftentimes Linux boxes that are running the services. We want security on both, but sometimes there's different things to solve for in different circumstances. So let's put together this scenario where our users may have installed or downloaded or done some stupid stuff on their workstation, and maybe they've introduced new vulnerabilities in the environment. Let me tell you, Wazuh can help track down all those different vulnerabilities across the different endpoints. Now, if we want some of that telemetry, I'm going to hop back over to our server, to the dashboard, right, in our server virtual machine, in a black terminal where we've been working here. And these all kind of, all the settings and configurations for Wazuh are inside of a static directory. And a lot of the text files, the things inside there, allow us to tweak and tune what Wazuh might do. Now, those are inside of the var OSSec directory. Now, that is owned by root, by the way, because we set this all up as our super user. So let me sudo bash to become the root user, and we'll hop into that var OSSec directory. Now, take a look at all the stuff in here. We have some active response folders that we'll dig into in a little bit, some of the frameworks, some of the rules that we could configure, and different modules that we might work with. But I want to show you the etc directory first. We're going to hop into all these others in just a little bit, but inside of the etc directory, we have this one specific file called our ossec.conf file. Now that, if I fire it up, that file, that ossec.conf, is our configuration file for Wazuh. Now here on the server in the dashboard, right, this is for the manager, but the exact same path and location is how we could configure our agents on all the little client machines. Take a look at all the stuff you could do here. We can configure our alerts, we can choose our logging format, we can determine how it's all communicating here, how often, maybe some potential integrations like working with OS query or system inventory work. Here's what I want to show you though. This is our vulnerability detector. Now, right now it is not enabled. You can see in this XML structure here, but we can just toggle this to yes. I'll hit save, Control S on my keyboard. And if you wanted to look down below, hey, maybe you can take a look at where you're seeing all these other potential vulnerabilities for what versions you're supporting. But let's get back to the terminal and remember systemctl restart for those changes to take effect for our Wazuh manager. I'll hit enter on that. Looking good. Let's make sure that is running A-OK with the status. Yep, no issues, active and running, and let's see it in action. Now, maybe this is a little bit of a poor man's trick here, but I am going to go ahead and force the restart because we saw in the configuration file, it would run on the start for every agent that we want. So let me go ahead and system control restart Wazuh agent over on our Linux box. Over in our Windows world, let's do the very same. And now on Windows, I'm going to do something crazy and just install a boatload of software. Say I'm a silly user. I know this sounds kind of wild, but let me go ahead and install literally everything from Ninite. How long will it take to click on every single checkbox on ninite.com? All right, firing it up. Let's go ahead and install everything here. It's going. Oh my goodness, look at my desktop. It's just getting flooded with new programs. Okay, it's still installing a whole lot of stuff, and there's still more to download and install, but I think I've got the point across. You know what? If we go take a look back at our dashboard, back in Wazuh, taking a look at our agents, let's dig into our Windows 11 machine. And obviously we've added kind of more to the attack surface, right? We've installed a whole lot of applications and programs that we totally don't need. In fact, maybe some of them have different vulnerabilities. And let's see, can Wazuh track that down? Yeah, okay. Say we've got, I don't know, 22 different critical vulnerabilities, almost 300 high vulnerabilities, and maybe some of that software that we installed we totally didn't need, and maybe that'll just have even more problems. We can, of course, click into the events tab here and maybe get that big long listing of all of these different CVEs, different vulnerabilities that we could click into, maybe learn a little bit more about. And it might even tell us, hey, what has been fixed or what has been solved from patching that we've done from an update, like a system upgrade. That's so sweet. And actually, if we go back to our security events tab, you can actually dig into everything that kind of has been happening here, and even a whole lot of the installation process from all those things that we just grabbed off of Ninite. You can see Windows installer, hey, started up something new. We installed Evernote, yep. Installed Zoom. Ooh, and do you see these new Windows service created? Like, yeah, sure, we've installed this new application in the program, but these are tagged with some of these specific MITRE attack framework techniques or the sub-techniques, everything that we could drill down into, say we're learning about for different threat actors or hackers or adversaries and what they do to hack into computers. Oh, take a look. They showcase everything from MITRE attack framework, and you could actually dig into maybe different things for different techniques, different software, the tactics, techniques, and procedures here. And there's so much for the MITRE ATT&CK framework that you could just explore. But the best part is these are all tied into specific events. Like we could go drill down into this and see, hey, what activity maps to what technique? This could be super duper helpful for threat hunting or detection engineering or anything that you might be doing on the Security Operations Center like watch floor. And with that, one thing that we could do, because I know a lot of folks, especially in comments on past videos, we say, look, it's cool. Yeah, we see some security tooling in the Windows realm, but what about Linux? I'd love to see some of these defensive capabilities in the Linux and server world. So Wazuh can do that. One of the best things about Wazuh is that it's open source and cross-platform and still runs on Linux. So let me show you something else, right? What if I were on my Ubuntu Linux machine, right? We have our Wazuh agent running. But what if I actually wanted to test some of those MITRE ATT&CK framework? Like all those techniques that we were just digging into. Now, I've shown you before, we could actually use something like the atomic red team to be able to see what visibility do we have? What is it going to actually catch in our SIEM solution, in our XDR solution? In the past, we've done that on Windows, but it will just as easily work on Linux. You can run these tests with an execution framework like Invoke Atomic, and that is going to fire stuff up with PowerShell. But we can just simply run PowerShell core on Linux. Let me keep this super easy. Let me just sudo snap install PowerShell, and that will probably need classic. That's fine by me. Now we've got PowerShell installed. I can fire it up with pwsh. Inside of PowerShell, now I can just simply go ahead and install some of the Invoke Atomics if we wanted to. Here's their wiki on telling you how you can install an Invoke Atomic Red Team. Let me scroll down to grab the execution framework and the whole Atomics folder. I'll pull this back in PowerShell. We'll just slap it in. Okay, installation of Invoke Atomic Red Team is complete, and now we can use the Invoke Atomic test function. Let's try it out. And this should be really cool too, because obviously all of this is going to get funneled right back into Wazuh. We can supply any atomic technique we might like, and remember, all those tests are based off of the MITRE ATT&CK framework, and we could dig into whatever we wanted to here. Like what if I search for something to look for passwords? How about that? Over on Linux, that is usually in like etc shadow and etc password. Let's see, here's a technique that it might pull it down. We could actually dig into this if we wanted to. Adversaries may dump the contents of etc password and etc shadow to enable offline password cracking. That technique is T1003.008. Okay. Can the Atomic Red Team test fire that up? Let's see it. Yeah, it did it. Okay, it's going. Look at all that. I was hacking myself. We were able to read and access etc shadow. Hey, pull down maybe the specific hash for our user. And then we could pull from etc password, do that all locally. And all of that data, all of the events, all the artifacts, everything here should be reflected back in Wazuh. And let's try some other tests. Let's fire up, I don't know, we can tab complete here, see anything that might work for Linux. We just ran 008. We could fire it up again, and we could try to run, I don't know, 7. Is that going to work for Linux? Oh, yeah. Okay, it's going to try with Mimi Penguin, something like Mimi Cats to try to steal passwords, but running on Linux. Looks like there were a whole lot of issues with that one. That one didn't seem to fire, but I'm curious, will it see the attempt within Wazuh? We could try some of the others, like 6. Okay, doesn't have something for Linux. Could try 5. Also not applicable on Linux, but let's go check Wazuh. Back over here on the server dashboard, let's go to our agents. Let's take a look at Linux and, ooh, okay, MITRE ATT&CK section has a whole lot of new numbers here. Let's go see in the security events section. A lot of events. Let's dig into it. Oh yeah, command not allowed. Okay, looks like there were some errors when it was trying to run Mimi Penguin, right? Didn't have that set up and installed here, but it was seemingly getting in and out of the root user, probably because there were, oh yeah, credentials when it was trying to pull etc shadow. Oh, that's so cool. Now we've looked at vulnerabilities, we've looked at tradecraft, we've even kind of looked at some of the regulations and compliance that you could dig into, but I know folks are going to ask, what about malware? What can Wazuh do to help protect from malware? Now, this is one of like the craziest, coolest parts because again, it's not just the SIEM or SIM, Security Information Event Management Platform. It's also that XDR where it can respond to malicious activity. If you do dig into some of the documentation, like I showcased earlier, like look, these are all the different ways you can spin this thing up, even an OVA file that's already pre-configured or Amazon machine images, Docker, Kubernetes, all that great stuff. Take a look at some more of the user manual though, because it tells you a little bit of all the different components of the server and the agent, but the capabilities is where it gets into even more crazy stuff it can do, like file integrity monitoring, seeing, hey, are there any changes made on the file system or even like the Windows registry? Or some of this gets into like malware detection. You can hook it up with VirusTotal or Yara, Windows Defender log collection, and active response, being able to do something after a rule is filed or one event is captured. They dig into all these in the capabilities section, but the proof of concept guide has a really, really cool structure and how you could actually build a lot of this out and test different things like blocking a known actor, like literally setting a firewall rule to no, deny all RDP or SSH requests, detecting brute force attacks, monitoring AWS infrastructure and network IDS, even SQL injection. But let's learn how we can literally detect and remove malware using VirusTotal's integration. I really want to know your thoughts on this because I tend to think like, oh, is that an AV? Like, are you getting a, sort of an antivirus in the mix alongside all these other bells and whistles? And when you hook it to VirusTotal, it's not just one antivirus, it's like it's all of them. Look at this. We can use the file integrity monitoring module, which will literally be like scanning and looking at file changes inside of a directory with the VirusTotal API key, and we can configure anything that we might like. The way we set up file integrity monitoring, though, is again in that configuration file, but over on our agent. And again, we'll look at this on Linux because I know a lot of folks were looking at, hey, what about that Linux malware, Linux defense? But remember, this works just as well on Windows. So let's get back to our Linux Ubuntu host where we were running our atomic test just a moment ago. Inside of PowerShell though, let me get back into Bash and let's move into that var ossec directory. Remember, inside of the etc component is where we have our ossec.conf file. And here we are back in the default configuration file. Now you can actually modify this, like not just on the agent itself, but through the server dashboard. You can modify the server's configuration all within the web UI alongside all of the other different agents. You don't need to SSH into them or try to control each and every one. But if we keep scrolling down, just like we did earlier for some of the integrations and we were working with the vulnerabilities here, this is the file integrity monitoring section. It's all under this syscheck. Now it's not disabled, so we can play with it. And these are directories that it is always going to be looking for different changes. And we can go ahead and configure one. Let's go ahead and say like one that we can scan in real time. We'll set that attribute to yes. And let's actually look inside of our users downloads directory. How about that? We'll close that out with /directories. Let me make sure to save this file. And if we hop back to the documentation, now they do some interesting stuff because they install some utilities like JQ, something to actually handle JSON or that JavaScript object notation. And they create a whole new bash script, something that will remove a threat running on the endpoint. Like, ooh, okay, we get the current directory, we check out our present working directory, we read in some of the input JSON, and then we start to interact with the API for VirusTotal. All we do is we, actually remove the file if we know that it's getting a bad response or VirusTotal tells us it's malicious. And then we can set that as executable and restart the agent so that those changes are set. Let's grab JQ, that utility. Let's copy and paste in the sudo apt install for JQ. And let's grab the script that they use to respond and remove a threat. Let's go ahead and copy this. JQ is done installing, so let's go ahead and put that in the var ossec active response bin directory. Now, if you take a look, this has all of the functionality that Wazuh already gives us for, doing something after an event has occurred. You can deny something at the firewall. You can remove a user. You can restart Wazuh. You can do all this cool stuff, and it's totally custom that you can make and add to these with whatever you want. So let's subble our remove threat. Let's go ahead and paste all this code in. Now that should be able to remove malware as we find it thanks to VirusTotal. Next, we just need to hook up the integration. But first, we do need to remember to change the permissions. We'll make that executable for our user and own it with the Wazuh group. Paste those in. And finally, let's remember to restart our Wazuh agent. Looking good. Now we have to go back and configure the Wazuh server, because bear in mind, Wazuh isn't going to do a whole lot of this proactive effort like taking action on a malicious sample that it found without you giving it that permission. Like if you actually wanted to check out some of the settings here, you could go dig into the modules, see what else it can do, but we need to give it permission. This is a cool dashboard, by the way. You can see all the other things you could toggle on or play with for auditing and policy, the threat detection response, all the regulatory compliance work. But let's make sure VirusTotal is on and good for us here. And now that we've given it permission, let's get back to the documentation and see, okay, we're going to end up adding some local rules. These will end up changing the alerts capability to see new changes to, they're using the /root directory as an example, but let's see if we can actually toggle it to do something in our users' downloads. In our server terminal, remember that black background, let's move into the rules directory inside of the etc folder here, and let's modify those local rules.xml. Looks like we'll just add a new group underneath this example here. We could paste in, hey, rules for our Linux system under the sys check here that we were using for our file integrity monitoring. Let's check out modified files in that home user downloads directory. We'll copy and paste that, so that is where we are tracking for these rules. Save that file, and now let's tweak our own Wazuh server configuration file and actually enter our own VirusTotal API key. So let's grab this syntax, hop out of the rules directory, modify our ossec.conf file, and this can go way down at the bottom, honestly. We'll go ahead and paste this in. Note the rule IDs here are likely set for when we get a trigger for the file integrity monitoring. In fact, we can actually see that. You know what? Let me, before we play with our VirusTotal API key, let me bring us back into the Wazuh dashboard and let's go take a look. Let's go see if our Linux agent here, remember that's Linux, well, that's the one that we just configured for the file and integrity monitoring section. Let's go see. The thing is, we just don't have any files in our downloads folder. So let's get back into our Linux agent here, and let me create a new tab. Say that I'm back as my user, and oh, I don't know, I went into my downloads directory. What if I just added a hello into anything.txt that I don't know, potentially downloaded? Or I can fire up Firefox and just genuinely download something. Let's go ahead and refresh the page on our Wazuh server, and let's see, does it see that anything.txt? Oh, I think it does. Files added. You can see it right there. Let's dig into the events section. Look at that. It added my stupid anything.txt. File is added to the system from the user. Just a simple hello is only 6 bytes here, but now we're getting the hash for it. We could check out the integrity of that file, and we could monitor for, oh, maybe that's being modified or deleted. Let's echo, please subscribe into our anything.txt, right? And then maybe we could go ahead and remove it. How about that? Now it's just not there anymore. Let's refresh Wazuh, see if it tracks it down. Yeah, look at that. In the events section, you can see it has been modified and then deleted. Okay, so we have the proof of concept for file integrity monitoring, but let's finish up our VirusTotal integration so that we can actually have it remove malware. Let me jump over to VirusTotal and I'll grab my API key here. We can see it. Let's go ahead and copy that API key, jump back to our server configuration, and we'll go ahead and replace the VirusTotal API key with what it should be. So I'll go ahead and paste that here. Fingers crossed I remember to redact and obscure that. But you can use the free API if you want. Honestly, the free API rate limits requests to about 4 per minute. If you have a premium VirusTotal API key, you are able to do a little bit more. Now we need to make sure that our server is configured in the configuration file to actually trigger that remove threat script that we staged on the agent. That way we say, look, okay, we're going to put together this potential command that can be ran, our remove threat.sh, and stage some of the active response capability to just fire it up. Let's copy this. Let's paste that at the very bottom of our ossec.conf file. And we also have the local rules that presumably will, hey, notify and sort of toggle, okay, whether or not we successfully remove the threat or not. Let's grab those. Remember, those should be in our local rules.xml file. So let's go ahead and paste in that to create a new group here for our VirusTotal functionality. We'll save this, and I think all we have left to do is restart our server. Let's get back to the command line, and let's do a systemctl restart our Wazuh manager. And now back on our Ubuntu client, like a regular agent running here. Downloads folder is currently empty, but let's go, I don't know, bop around like a regular user. Say I were browsing the old internet. I don't know, I got some Discord token stealer running. Maybe some remote access Trojan, could be anything here. Let's do a super simple example that will obviously blow up VirusTotal, the iCar file, the malware test and sample file. Super simple example, but if we wanted to, if you still didn't believe me after this, look, we could go ahead and get some real malware running, but let me go ahead and download the icar.com file. It has been successfully downloaded. Let me try to open up. Oh, you see in the downloads, it was there for half a second and then deleted. Did Wazuh do what it should have here? You know what? Let me put these side by side and let's see how fast we can see it go ahead and clean up with the active response in action. Let me click the iCar download again. Here it is. And I don't know how long it's going to last. Oh, that's so cool. Let's hop back to the server and let's see those logs. Let me refresh on our file integrity monitoring page here for the agent. Here are the events getting started. Let's load it up here. And there it is. Hey, it's already being downloaded. You can see even the part files there, and they all get deleted. What do our security events tell us here? Linux agent, let's go to that pane. Look at that! Active response, remove threat, remove the threat located at our downloads icar.com file. Let's get some real malware in there now. Oh, you know what? Here is maybe a fun example. We're hosting this little capture the flag competition that has a good bundle of malware accessible for us. We could grab one of the remote access Trojans here. I think we genuinely have a rat accessible. Let's see if I can download that. It is 7-zip as the archive. So let's see. I'll go ahead and extract that into the current directory. Oh! It removed it like that. I've tried to download it multiple times now. It keeps deleting it. It's not even extracted. VirusTotal must already be tracking that. I mean, the password is infected, right? It's pretty clearly malware. How about this batch script one? Let me look back at my VirusTotal integration. It is obviously going to be seeing, oh, there's the slight uptick. Yep, we're starting to use the API. Hey, now, bear in mind, I just showcased this example on Linux because I know there were a whole lot of asks, oh, what about defense on Linux? And this is one way you can do it, but this works just as well on Windows. Like, you could fire this up with the same exact VirusTotal integration and anything that whatever antivirus might scan. Look, now you've got it covered from a SIEM perspective, an XDR perspective, an antivirus perspective. This is just too cool. And there's so much more that you can do. Like, we have just scratched the surface, and honestly, I'm really looking forward to. I want to do a whole lot more videos with Wazuh to showcase all the things we could cook up. Because think about, look, we've covered regulations compliance, we've talked about different vulnerabilities, we've talked about our whole security configuration, we've talked about identifying different tradecraft, like living off the land techniques, MITRE attack framework, and how hackers hack, and malware. And we can do so much more, like block hosts and the firewall. We could actually hook up some Slack integrations or email notifications whenever something's going off. But look, the best part about Wazuh is that it is open source. You can find all of the stuff on GitHub and tons of contributors putting in great work, whether it's creating new integrations or making new active response capabilities or playing with some of those, file integrity monitoring capabilities. You can just crack it open, like digging into the code here, seeing how the whole framework thing comes together. Oh, and by the way, like literally everything that we've been doing, all the stuff that we've got a chance to play with inside of the dashboard is also accessible through the API. It's just running on the server, port 55,000, and like seriously, if you wanted to, go into the tools section here, API console, you could literally just do all of this through code and API if you wanted to. Hey, maybe that was a long video. I don't know. Look, Wazuh is just blowing my mind. I'm sorry. I think it is crazy cool. All the different things you can do with it. File integrity monitoring, that active response, digging into malware with Yara and VirusTotal, and all this stuff like it genuinely makes for a SIEM and an XDR solution that is great. Open source and free. If you want to make your life a little bit easier, yes, Wazuh does offer some software as a service capability where like they'll do it all for you. But if you want that control and you want to build it all, you can. And we just did. So hey, seriously, I hope you go play with it. I hope you kick the tires. I think it's awesome, all the things you could build out. I think in the future, we can put together some cool videos where, I don't know, we're looking at the latest new malware samples or different threat actors and what they do in their TTPs with the MITRE attack framework. And then kind of, I don't know, building our defenses with file integrity monitoring and active response and all the other cool stuff that Wazuh can do completely for free, all open source, accessible and ready for you to play with right now. I hope you go take a look. Seriously, link in the video description if you would like to play with Wazuh and all the stuff that we got to experiment with in this video. Huge thanks. Wazuh did sponsor this video and I'm just grateful for their support. But seriously, I think it is such a cool thing to play and learn all this cybersecurity stuff with. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks so much for bearing with me. I hope you learned something. I hope you had some fun. I hope, I don't know, it opened your eyes to what you can do for free with open source tooling to bring more cybersecurity defense and to help protect your environments. Wazuh can be a part of that. Thanks so much for watching. See you in the next video.